However, you don't need to worry. You will not be part of that recording. Just stay muted. The recording is only going to pick up those of us who are unmuted and talking into our microphone. So never fear, that recording will not include you. Please do use the chat box throughout the evening to make comments, whatever you want, ask questions. Davith and I will sort of be keeping an eye on that, and we'll pull out anything that we need to from that. And we will be sharing links to a blog post that has all of tonight's titles in it, so that you can find them all in one convenient place for happy shopping at a later date. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Davith.
Hi everyone, I just posted the blog post and put a capitalized O in the middle of U, sorry about that. But that's the blog post there that you can find and everything. It's going to, that's the one that will be permanent for the next month or so until the next bookseller book chat. You can also get to it if you click on the menu on northshire.com. Along the top of the menu, it's called Notes from the Shire. And you'll find that there until the next one of these where we update it then. So I had a couple of books I wanted to recommend first. We were going to have master bookseller Alden Graves with us this evening, but he's a bit of a technophobe and was going to Zoom with people's help at the bookstore, but there's a lot of snow, and so he went home early. So we're going to have to sort of try in his place. So, but he'll be here for this next time. The first book I'd like to recommend, I think I mentioned to this once before, is Metropolis. A History of the City, Humankind's Greatest Invention by Ben Wilson. This time I finished it, and it's a fantastic book of history. It goes all the way from Uruk, the very first city, which meant the city, to sort of aspects of the future. It looks like by the middle of the century, Lagos, Nigeria is going to be the world's largest city. It's the world's fastest growing city right now. And there are plans for a Dubai style place on the coast of Eco-Atlantic, it's going to be called, but as sort of an African Dubai outside of Lagos. And then there's also a large, what we sort of disparagingly call slums, but sort of one of the things that Wilson is so amazing about is sort of discussing, what a slum is and talking about the just sort of the vast amount of sort of gross domestic product that's in there. It's become this one of the fascinating things about this book. There's a whole section in the slum outside of Lagos that's Africa's answer to Silicon Valley, in which all of the technology, for instance, that you get rid of, that you're recycling, you're giving back to your phone companies, all the old phones or computers, it all makes its way apparently to this Silicon Valley type place in Lagos, where it's repurposed and it's just growing exponentially. Anyway, it's a fascinating book, and it's only a small fragment of it. It does go in chronological order, as I said, but don't be feared about that. There are these sort of very interesting meditations on certain elements of cityness or culture as we go through. So for instance, in the section about Rome, which was the first city to reach 1 million people, which didn't happen again until London in the middle of the 1700s. During this section of Rome, Wilson sort of meditates on, how bathing was this sort of fundamental aspect of civilization, of Roman culture, how it sort of stayed in the rest of the world, but sort of fell away in Europe because the baths were sort of the last things to go. And that was really when people sort of got out of Rome or got out of the cities. That was sort of the big cultural sort of sense of community you got. Anyway, it's a very fascinating book with everything in between. I learned a great deal about medieval German cities. The section on Baghdad is fantastic. A great discussion of all of the sort of the city of the culture and scientists that were there. Oh, and then there's also just really riveting reading about the sort of the horrors of the Industrial Revolution in Chicago and Manchester. That is just sort of disturbing to read, yet at the same time, it sort of answers the question I always felt of why would someone live in one of these horrible places. It really gets you out of rural poverty, but there's a great sense of community in the street that existed in these cities. So anyway, that's enough of Metropolis. And the last book I want to recommend is Heirloom Kitchen by Anna Francese Gass. This is a an amazing cookbook. And it's called Heritage Recipes and Family Stories from the Tables of Immigrant Women. I think I recommended this one before as well, but there's a reason to do it. We're hosting an event with her, another virtual event on Thursday, and she's going to do a cooking demonstration of the pierogies that are in here. I've not made them myself. I won't be cooking along, as we're suggesting people can do. But I have made her spaghetti and meatball recipe, her spanakopita, her, it's called, as I just found it here, Nelly's pastizio, which is a Greek noodle dish that she calls the love child of lasagna bolognese and fettuccine alfredo. The idea behind this is Anna went around and started jotting down the recipes of various immigrant grandmothers around the country. So these are all their recipes. So you know they're going to be the best. And they really are the best. The spaghetti is amazing. It's become my normal spaghetti sauce that I cook for everyone in the house all the time. Anyway, so that's enough of my books, and it is my pleasure to introduce my coworker, Annabelle Maxon. She's going to talk about a few books as well. And so Annabelle, take it away.
Thank you. All right, hi, I'm Annabelle. I'm going to start off with a children's picture book, and that is Our Subway Baby by Peter Mercurio. And I don't have a physical copy, but again, the title and cover will be on that blog post. But it is a beautiful little story about how this man, it's told by the perspective of Peter, and his husband find their son on the subway in New York City, and the process that they had to go through to get him into their lives and being able to formally adopt him. And it's a beautiful story about family, and it really shows that you don't have to be blood related to somebody to feel the love and the connection that family does. So I would really, really recommend that one. And even for an age group that is generally like a lot younger, for those picture books, it was still extremely poignant to me. And I've like made all the people around me read it just because it's such a beautiful story. So I'd really recommend that one. And then the next book that I have actually hasn't come out yet. And it's Brightly Woven, the graphic novel by Alexandra Bracken. I believe one of her first published books was the prose version of Brightly Woven, and it follows a magic system where it's based off of colors, and so the colors that you control are based off of like different threads, and if you are more talented in different magic systems, you wear one of the characters in it wears a many-layered cloak, and he wears cloaks of each color. So he has like a red one, a yellow one, a blue one, and then a black one covering all of them. But the main plot of the story is him meeting this girl who's a very talented weaver, and it's basically them trying to discover this plot and trying to bring information to the queen before there's a trial to decide like the fate of the kingdom and like the fate of what's happening to basically the sorcerers there. So that one was very interesting. The art style was very beautiful. I thought it was very well done. It's not like too complex, but it is like very detailed. And yeah, I'm excited for that one to come out in February. And the next one I actually have a physical copy of, is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. And this one came out earlier in 2020 in May. And Elizabeth Acevedo has been like a Northshire favorite for many years now, since she came out with The Poet X in I believe like 2017. But this is actually the first book of hers that I've read, and like The Poet X, it's written in verse, which I'm always kind of skeptical with books written in verse, but it was extremely, extremely captivating. And the story follows two girls, one who lives in New York City and one who lives in the Dominican Republic, and what happens when they find out that their father has died in a plane crash. Um, and it's basically like a family story, like a found family story, um, a story about, I would say, female empowerment, love, all of that. And I would highly, highly recommend it. It's a YA title, but I mean, Elizabeth Acevedo is known for her like excellent writing, so this was very well written. I think it would be great for any age, not just a young adult audience. And yeah, that one is very, very good. And then next, I'm moving on to The Way Back by Gabrielle Savitt. And that one came out in November of 2020. Actually, it coincidentally came out on my birthday in 2020, which is nice because it was one of my favorites of the year. So I have that one, and this is what it looks like. This book was absolutely fantastic. Gabrielle Savitt also wrote Anna and the Swallow Man a few years ago, which was also one that was like really highly acclaimed. I haven't had the chance to read that one yet, but this is such a beautiful story. It reminds me of a combination of like Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book and Catherine Arden's the Winter Night trilogy, which I actually have the first book right here. That's The Bear and the Nightingale. And this is an adult fantasy, and The Graveyard Book is a middle grade. So it's kind of fitting that this one falls right in the middle. And it's the story of two children from this extremely small town and how they have to essentially find their way back from the Jewish land of the dead. And it's beautiful. It has so much culture in it and so many different stories about, again, like about family, about friendship, and about the relationship that people have with death. So that book was just fantastic. Moving on to my second to last one, I have Sarahland by Sam Cohen, and that one comes out March 9th. And it's a story collection. And this is actually my first read of the new year, and I found it fascinating. It was, again, I keep saying very interesting. It's not usually the type of book that I would pick up, but something about it drew me in, and I found it very entertaining. The stories are all quite different. The thing that ties them together, though, is that each of the main characters is named Sarah, and it explores like the history of that name, basically going from like the Abrahamic tales of Sarah, and there's actually like sort of a retelling of that story from the Old Testament, but with like an LGBTQ plus twist on it, which I thought was very well done. All of the stories in here are very LGBTQ friendly. I would say very feminist. And it was actually, I found out that this after I had finished the book, but a professor from my college, which is Mount Holyoke College, had actually been like the main person to blurb it. So that was an interesting thing for me to find out. So again, that one comes out in March. So I would highly recommend you pick it up when it's released. And then the last book I have, which I will admit I haven't finished yet, is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco, and that one came out October 27th. And Carrie Maniscalco is also the author of the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, and she's in the James Patterson imprint. Her series was actually like the first books to come out of that imprint. And so this is a different story. It follows one half of two twin sisters, and they live in Sicily, and they come from a long line of witches, or stregas, as they're called in Italian. And it follows Amelia, the one twin, after the sudden and violent death of her sister. And she's trying to figure out what supernatural entity killed her sister, and she's trying to get revenge. And she's essentially like stopping at nothing to do that, even though she's been kind of like the obedient, well-meaning, like soft daughter before that. And again, I really like Carrie Maniscalco's writing. I would say probably this is more for an older YA audience. Probably I'd say like 15 or 16 and up, but I'm really excited to see the end of this. And I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm so happy to be continuing to read the stuff that she's coming out with. And that is all that I have.
Thanks so much, Annabelle. That was great. All right, and then our next presenter, another bookseller from the Manchester, Vermont store, Samantha Beitler. Please take us away with your recommendations. You're still muted, though.
Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's safe and warm, because I know it's snowing like crazy out. I have 5 books to talk about, and coincidentally 4 of them are actually on the best-selling fiction and nonfiction, so I know there's other fans out there. The first is actually my favorite of the 5. It's called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. It's a lit fiction book. Matt Haig is a great, I believe, British writer. I was not familiar with him prior to this. I know he's written a couple of other novels as well as an autobiography. This book was amazing. I recommend it to everybody. It can be read any age. I mean, probably, I'd say around YA and above. It's a story about a girl named Nora, and she has a lot of regret. She's a little bit kind of lost in her life, and unfortunately, she decides that she wants to commit suicide. However, instead of kind of dying, she falls into a limbo called the Midnight Library, where she's able to access different lives that she could have lived. And it's beautiful, it's hilarious, it's heartbreaking, and it's just one of the best books I've read in so long, because you grow to love Nora so much, and you kind of love the adventure that she goes on, the millions of different lives, and just seeing the things that she initially regretted, realizing, you know, maybe that wasn't my destiny. And it has a wonderful, heartwarming ending. It's a fantastic book for men and women. I have recommended it to literally everybody, and I've probably had like push it on so many customers here. It's definitely something to, you know, curl up and read. I can't recommend this book more. The second book is completely different. It's actually nonfiction. It's a science book called Breath. I actually initially didn't even really think about this. I just went for the cover because I just love it so much. I think it's beautiful, but just everything that's going on with COVID right now, especially how it's attacking the lungs. I wanted to learn a little bit more about, you know, the science of breathing, and it's called The New Science of a Lost Art. So basically, it's by a man named James Nestor. He's a New York Times bestselling author, and he has a very comical, dry way of writing. It is essentially about his journey kind of through the different types of breathing. He has a couple of breathing problems, and it all starts with his initial journey in just kind of a hospital and whatnot. And then he goes into a bunch of different, both holistic and just a bunch of, sorry, I'm getting a bunch of text messages. He's going through a bunch of different breathing exercises via the Wim Hof, certain Tibetan monks, and also just standard. And he sorry, my brother's having a baby right now. He just texted me, so that's why I'm a little, I know, sorry. So I kind of got off my train of thought. Yes, my sister-in-law's about to have a baby. She's in the hospital. But let's go back to Breath, because it's amazing. It's really interesting. It's totally different than what I would normally read. I'm normally like a history or a fiction reader, but it's insane. It's kind of both science, both autobiography, in that he goes into his own breathing problems, and it just opens up a whole different world of stuff that I would have never known about. I think it's really wonderful, especially just what's going on, especially with COVID, and it talks about a lot of different things, both it's just good. Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. I apologize. I'm gonna be an ant. All right, so the next one is Anxious People. I cannot recommend this enough. It's really good, especially if you're into nonfiction and humor. It's great. He's very funny. So Anxious People is by Frederick Bachmann. This is actually I believe number 3 on the best-selling fiction. Frederick Bachmann has actually written many, many novels. I have not read them, but I've heard they're amazing. I know The Man Called Ove is one of his most popular, Beartown. But this is my first foray into Frederick Bachmann land, and I have to say, it is amazing. This book, I did not want to put down. I read it in probably 3 days, and it was one of the most heartwarming books I've ever read. The thing about it is it's hard to give an actual description, but basically what I'll say is it's about a bank robbery gone wrong, where after a bank robber in Stockholm attempts to rob a cashless bank, they run across the street and into an apartment showing, and then it divulges into a hostage situation. And you just kind of learn about all the different characters, and it goes back and forth between multiple different scenarios. And it's just one of the most amazing, well-written, concise, and beautiful pieces I've ever read. I have to say that I think this is perfect it's a perfect gift. It's a wonderful gift because it really it shows, oh, thank you, Linda. It shows that I feel like it's a very sentimental piece, and I love it. And it's just wonderfully well written and wonderfully quotable. It's really good. Sorry, I'm really excited. The next one is a true crime book. I'm gonna be an ant. The next one is a true crime book, trying to keep it together. It's actually just a recent release. I believe it was released in November. It's called We Keep the Dead Close, and it's by Becky Cooper. It's about a murder at Harvard. So in 1969, and I just recently finished this. In 1969, an anthropology or an archaeology student named Jane Britton was murdered in her apartment, and had red ochre spread over her body, which is technically a burial ritual. It remained an unsolved case for many, many years. And basically what the book is about is how this girl, this had happened in a time when a lot was going on. And essentially Harvard and the Massachusetts, the Cambridge Police Department just swept it under the rug. And it kind of delves into why that occurred, what was happening, and essentially the dark side of academia and how it just kind of is an entirely different world from what they're promoting. Harvard specifically, there's a lot of backdoor dealing and a lot of different things that are just a little shady. And what I love about We Keep the Dead Close is it also, much like the previous nonfiction book that I had mentioned, Breath, it has an autobiographical sense to it. It really talks about, and very similar with James Nestor and Breath as they go on these two separate journeys, like one is about a murder, one is about learning about, the art of breathing. They really delve into it and kind of relate it to their own life, and not necessarily in a negative way, but how it encapsulates them. And this project becomes like their striving force. And it's just nice. Like, I think I love the fact that Becky feels so related to Jane, the murder victim, and she really puts herself in her shoes, and it takes over her life, but in a good way, because it gives her purpose. I mean, Becky, when she had written this, was just a graduate from Harvard, And she was kind of, you know, a little lost, like we all are, especially in a time of COVID, like we're all, you know, kind of trying to figure everything out. And it's nice to see that it's inspiring that she got so into this case, that she actually helped. I think she actually kind of helped reintroduce the case. It became, spoiler, I'm not going to spoil it, but it was solved. I won't say what, but it was solved. And I like to think that Becky's interest actually reintroduced the case and had it helped it to reopen. And my last book is Anna North Outlawed. It just came out, and it's actually Reese Witherspoon's book club of the month, so you know it's gonna do well, and there's probably gonna be a movie. It was really good. I read the cover, or I read the inside, and I was a little hesitant. It sounded a little but I actually really, really liked it. The reason I liked it, and I'll just give a quick blurb, but basically it's about a young girl named Ada in 1890s West. I believe they don't necessarily give an exact point, but it's somewhere around kind of like Utah territory. So she is a 17-year-old. She's just recently married, and because she's barren in her town, you are hung as a witch for being barren. So rather than, you know, go to the gallows, she escapes and joins this amazing kick butt feminist queer outlaw group. And they're some of the most amazing women. In all honesty, if there was a spin-off novel of just the group called The Hole in the Wall Gang, that would be amazing, because I can't get enough of The Hole in the Wall Gang. And it's basically just her exploits with this wonderful group of women and what they do to survive, and essentially how they strive to make a community where all women can be accepted, no matter of their sexual preference, no matter of, you know, their ability to give birth. And it's very uplifting, and I loved it. So that's it. Sorry I got flustered, but I'm gonna go be an aunt now. Yay!
Congratulations, Samantha. That's amazing.
I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And that's awesome. Fantastic. Well, up next, we have my wonderful colleague, Rachel Person. Rachel, tell us about
Yes, and congratulations, Samantha, from me too. So I sort of jumped in also to fill in for the wonderful Alden, who got stuck in snow and couldn't be with us tonight. So I have a short list. One is a book that just came out in paperback. It was released in hardcover this time last year. It was actually, we did an event with the author in February in the Saratoga store. I had the chance to interview her. It's Weather by Jenny Offal. She wrote some years back The Department of Speculation, which was a New York Times 10 best book of that year. Weather is absolutely brilliant. Jenny is very experimental in her writing. It's literary fiction. It's written always in sort of short snippets. I don't know how well you can see the page, the way that like the text is broken up into blocks. She writes absolutely beautifully, very funny. There's a lot of humor in her writing, but this is experimental literary fiction about climate change and about a librarian who is, you know, in the last several years becoming increasingly worried about climate change and falling into a rabbit hole of researching survivalists and the sort of really extreme, you know, stockpiling 10 years worth of canned goods kind of survivalists so that she and her son can find a way to survive climate catastrophe. This does not sound like a fun thing to read or a funny thing to read, but the book is an absolute delight. It's so funny and so incisive and so thoughtful. It was one of my favorite reads of last year, and it just came out in paperback. So I'm plugging it again today for anyone who didn't get a chance to read it in hardcover. Definitely worth picking up the paperback and enjoying Weather. And then something else that's very funny, for anyone who got caught up in the world of Bridgerton in the last little while on Netflix and is looking for some romance to turn to, I recommend 10 Things I Hate About the Duke by Loretta Chase. It is a very fun, fluffy romance set slightly later than Bridgerton. It's Victorian as opposed to Regency. It's very funny. There are a lot of hijinks, but some of those same tropes and style that you find in Bridgerton. So if you're wanting something similar after watching that, this is a great one to pick up. Loretta Chase's books are always very fun and very funny. So that is a great option. And then two books, my last two books are ones that I'm actually both in the middle of. In case you wondered, do booksellers read multiple books at once? This bookseller does. I usually have a downstairs book going, an upstairs book going, and then other things I pick up in the between times. These two are ones that I'm reading, both of them, at least I started them both because we have events planned for them. And I thought they sounded very cool. So neither of these is out yet. These would both be pre-orders. The first one is The Smash Up by Allie Benjamin. Allie has been a favorite at the Northshires for a long time for her children's books. She wrote the National Book Award winner, The Thing About Jellyfish, some years back, which is an absolutely stunning middle grade novel. She's just a remarkable writer. This is her debut adult novel. So this is her first book for adults. It is set in the Berkshires during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And it is a loose, but maybe not so loose retelling of Ethan Frome. And it is so smart and incisive, the half that I've read so far, about contemporary politics and contemporary family life. And of course, as we all know from Ethan Frome, there are some pretty dramatic New Englandy ways to be unhappy families. And this book is following that, but I'm really enjoying reading it so far. So this is my, and that is coming out on February 2nd. So coming out next week. And our event with Allie is towards the end of the month. David has put a link in there. I think it's February 20 something. So that's going to be a really fun one. And this is great. And then the other one is an event that we're not hosting till April. And in fact, I just looked and it looks like the date isn't even confirmed yet. But I'm also in the middle of Liberty by Caitlin Greenage. Caitlin Greenage is a journalist who I've been following for a while. She's really interesting, a really great writer. This novel is her second novel. It is historical fiction. The part that I've read so far, I think it's going to be set in two different time periods, but what I've read so far is all set in a free Black community in Brooklyn before the Civil War. And the young woman, Liberty, who's the narrator, her mother is the doctor in town, and they are very active in the Underground Railroad. So they're a stop off for people who have been smuggled to Brooklyn in caskets to their home. And her mother is working in her medical capacity to try to heal the psychic rifts of slavery for these people who she has helped freedom. It is incredibly beautiful writing is the thing that is really striking me in this. It's really just lyrical and beautiful, and the voice of the narration is stunning. So this is one that I'm also about halfway through, also enjoying mightily, and also excited that we're going to be hosting the author coming up. This comes out on March 30th. So it's a little while to wait, but worth the wait. And then hopefully we have a few dates that are on hold. It looks like we'll probably be hosting an event with her in the middle of April. So if you order it, you'd have time to read it before the event. And that is my whole list of books in my little fill-in for Alden. So we have some time left. If people would like to chime in the chat about books that they've read recently that they would like to recommend, or if people have Stump the Bookseller questions, if you want recommendations for specific genres or specific types of books, we're happy to try to let you know what we think might be good.
While you're typing in your questions or thoughts, let me just give you a little bit of literary trivia here. The Holyoke professor that Annabelle mentioned who blurbed Sarah Land is Booktopia alum Andrea Lawler. They joined us when in whatever year that was, the only one I ever did. They joined us for their book, Politics, the Form of a Mortal Girl, which both I liked and bookseller Joe Michel Uno from Vermont also liked.
Would have been 2019, Davies.
2019, that's the one.
And Linda also chimed in the chat saying that recommending The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which was one of the books that we had the hardest time keeping in stock right in the lead up right to Christmas. And we got to pile in on, I want to say like December 23rd. And I was so happy that we could fill all those orders. That was the one that we were all sort of waiting on tenterhooks to see if we'd get it back in stock. And then Mamie says that she can't say enough about Beneficence by Meredith Hall, which is one I had not heard of. That's not been on my radar. I'm going to look it up right now.
I'm about 100 pages right now into Hanif Abdurraqib's book that's coming out in March, A Little Devil in America, which is subtitled Notes on Black Performance. And so it's really good so far. It is the funeral of Aretha Franklin. There's all kinds of very interesting essays yet, but my thoughts are not yet together about it.
I was lucky enough a few years ago to hear Hanif Abdurraqib speak. And if you ever get the chance to hear him read or speak, run, do not walk. It was one of, and I host events multiple times a week and have since 2013. And before that, I actually worked in the theater producing literary events. And his poetry reading was one of the most phenomenal literary experiences I've ever had in my entire life. So he's definitely amazing. However, I apparently can't spell his name because I was just trying to pull up the book that David mentioned and I am not spelling it correctly. So I'm going to have to take a minute to look that up.
I don't know if I can spell his last name, A-B-D-U.
And I did just look at Beneficence. It's a gorgeous cover. It is about a family overcoming tragedy to reclaim goodness and peace in their lives. It looks really interesting. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat. Then some more recommendations that we have coming in from the audience. Shirley suggests The House on Vespers Sands, which is a mystery set in Victorian London. And actually we had a rep picks night last week where that one was mentioned as being really great. So that one's coming up a bunch. And then Wayne's iPad, which I know is not Wayne, and I remember it's somebody else, but I can't remember who, but it's is reading an older book, Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan, which is set in World War II Italy.
It's Karen.
Karen. Yes, Wayne's iPad is Karen. Karen recommends Beneath the Scarlet Sky.
Susan's iPad recommends Valeria Luiselli's Lost Children Archive, which is another Northshire staff pick. Our former bookseller Whitney really loved that, and it's been on my, it's currently on my bedside table, waiting to get into.
Yeah, all of us at Northshire have very frightening bedside tables. The piles turn into piles, which turn into piles.
You think we really need to be attending to find out about more books?
There's a note from Shirley. She says The Survivors by Jane Harper, which is coming out in early February. Is another great Jane Harper. Which sounds great. So I think we are probably, it sounds like, out of recommendations. It seems like everyone knows what they need and doesn't have others to chime in with. So thank you all so much for being here. Congratulations, Samantha. I'm so excited to hear about your new niece or nephew.
Awesome. Oh,
yeah, that was very fun. I like that. I think we should have more children born in our Zoom meetings. I feel like that's a nice vibe we've got going on. we'll try to keep that up for you guys.
Hi, Jen. I see Jen Grigsby and Samantha scream.
Hi, Jen. She's a bookseller in Manchester who I put in a request to be on a bookseller book chat in the future too. So maybe we'll see Jen in person one of these days. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thursday, Anna Francese Gas for Heirloom Kitchen, if you got the time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.